far right, unwilling to shoulder even the slightest critique from Rush Limbaugh or Laura Ingraham, changed his mind.
All right, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer blaming President Trump and, as you heard, talk radio hosts for delaying partial shutdown negotiations. Republican Senator Bob Corker echoed the statement as well, calling far-right radio a tyranny. So let's talk about it with some talk radio hosts. Robert Patillo on the left, Josh Kimbrell appropriately on the right-hand side of your screen. Josh, were you a little bummed that Chuck Schumer didn't call you out too?
You know, I just get lumped in there with everybody. Liberals in both parties have always hated talk radio hosts because we represent a unique medium where it's a constant conversation with the American people, and frankly, we're a megaphone for the American people. And the message the American people are sending is we don't want open borders, and even if that means a partial government shutdown. So I guess Bob Corker and Chuck Schumer think we're all tyrants, but Merry Christmas to y'all too, guys. Appreciate that.
Robert, you've always had a unique perspective on this, even as a Democrat, that the demagoguing of the right by your leadership is not necessarily the right way to win this.
Well, absolutely. I think what Chuck Schumer has to understand is what the president is doing is doing what his base wants him to do. These talk radio hosts are the voices, they're the megaphone, they're the speakers for his base, and he's listening to exactly the pulse of what his base is saying. Democrats could do a lot of that. Listen to what your constituents are saying instead of listening to what the lobbyists and the special interest groups are saying. And what I don't see anyone saying they want a government shutdown right now. So we have to get the grown people in the room and find a compromise that can satisfy all parties.
Grown people in the room in Washington, D.C. That's hard to find. Tall order sometimes to get everybody to act like adults. This is Chuck Schumer yesterday talking about the bill and then issuing a threat, if you will.
Everyone knew yesterday, long before the House vote, that the president's wall lacked 60 votes in the Senate. It will never pass the Senate. Not today, not next week, not next year. So, Mr. President, President Trump, if you want to open the government, you must abandon the wall.
Robert, Democratic leadership seems almost obsessed with denying the president simply the words, the wall. Tell us how that plays with the base and then how it plays with the special interests that you talked about.
Well, I think the concept of the wall, the biggest issue is that the president has not articulated how to fund, quote unquote, the wall. If he said, well, we're going to do $5 billion in cuts to these programs in order to pay for the wall, that's fine. If we're saying we're having offsets for a dollar for dollar offset for the wall spending, that's fine. But he has to articulate and go directly to the American people, not on a Facebook or YouTube video, not on Twitter, but in an actual press conference to the American people, explaining exactly what this money is going towards, how this will not explode the deficit and the debt, and what it will do to ensure national security. We can't have government by tweeting,
Robert, of all of the federal government, Robert, of all of the federal government programs you have come on this program to advocate for, $5 billion for the wall is really what is going to explode the debt and deficit of the United States government?
Well, I don't know when I became the lone voice for fiscal conservatism or the only deficit.
It's hard to find in Washington.
But I feel like...
Look, that's amazing. That's amazing to me because I do hear people on the left and Chuck Schumer talking about how this is a budget buster. These are the same folks that supported $1 trillion annual spending on expansion of Medicaid under Obamacare and doubled the debt in 8 years under Barack Obama. The reality is illegal immigration costs our economy more than $25 billion every year. So even if we go on the top end on $5 billion.
There is the economic argument. Let's stick to the political argument here. I only got 30 seconds left or so. Are Republicans missing the opportunity not to demand $5 billion for the wall, but demand $25 billion for the wall to actually try and push this through rather than just take a little baby bite at it? If you're going to get blamed for exploding the deficit, as Robert is, might as well, get the whole thing.
Well, most of what I've heard is that $5 billion is enough to secure the southern border. And I don't think Republicans are trying to just ask for massive amounts of spending.
Dallas Morning News says it only gets you 200 miles.
Spending. Well, the point is you're going to go for the highest urban crossing areas where 90% of the crossings are taking place in 21 spots across the border. If the president can at least get $5 billion, we can stop the greatest proportion of illegal immigration across the border. And the fact that Democrats are willing to shut down the federal government over border security speaks to their priorities to the American people just in time for the Christmas season, and I think the American people are on the side of the president on this.
Budget hawk Robert Patillo, we're going to have to come out with some walkout music for you to that note. Josh Kimbrough with us as well. Gentlemen, thanks so much. Merry Christmas to you both.
Merry Christmas.
All the best.
Merry Christmas.
Molly?
The Senate will officially proceed to the House passed. The Senate already officially proceeded to the House passed funding legislation, so that's pending. But we did so with an understanding that no further votes will occur until the President and Senate Democrats have reached an agreement to resolve this. Let me say that again. We pushed the pause button until the President, from whom we will need a signature, and Senate Democrats, from whom we will need votes, reach an agreement. No procedural votes, no test votes, just a meaningful vote on a bipartisan agreement whenever that is reached. And it's my hope that it's reached sooner rather than later. It is no mystery why securing our nation's borders is such a major priority for Republicans here in the Senate and Republicans over in the House and for President Trump. Any look at the plain facts leads to one simple conclusion. The crisis of security at our southern border is real. Over the past year, Customs and Border Protection's records of apprehensions and interdictions at our southern border are literally, Mr. President, staggering. 800 known gang members, a 50% increase over last year. Nearly 7,000 individuals with criminal histories, including weapons trafficking and violent offenses. More than double the levels of fentanyl, along with other illicit substances. So the report card is quite clear. America's borders are in crisis. These facts I've stated are not partisan facts. They aren't ideological. They're just facts. Just facts. They don't describe the Republican Party's version of events or the president's version of events. They describe reality. So one would think that securing our homeland, controlling our borders, and protecting the American people would be bipartisan priorities. Uncontroversial, common sense, bipartisan priorities, a core duty of any nation's government. And here's the interesting thing. Until very, very recently, Mr. President, that seemed to be the case. Back in 2006, Democrats were perfectly happy to support hundreds of miles of physical barriers along the border. 26 Democrats voted for the bill, including then Senator Obama, then Senator Clinton, and my good friend, the current Democratic leader from New York. But what about more recently? Earlier this year, Mr. President, the Democratic leader offered $25 billion for physical barriers in his negotiations with the president. 5 times as much as the White House is reasonably requesting right now. And that was just earlier this year. Republicans in the House and in the Senate believe the House's provision for $5 billion in border funding plus additional disaster funding was completely reasonable. I was glad to vote to advance that legislation yesterday. My colleagues and I are proud to stand with the American people on this subject for the safety of American families and the health and security of our communities. But this time, Democrats have rejected that reasonable request. They've refused to meet President Trump halfway and provide even one-fifth of the resources for the border they were willing to provide just a few months ago. Just a few months ago. There's no bright line of principle that separates hundreds of miles of physical barriers in 2006 from new physical barriers in 2018. There is no major philosophical shift that made $25 billion for border security worthwhile just a few months ago, but makes a far more modest investment of $5 billion immoral, and unacceptable today? No, Democrats haven't rejected the president's request and invited this partial government shutdown because of some principled objection that they just discovered in the last few weeks. It's not some principled discovery they've just made in the last few weeks. They brought this about because they're under a lot of pressure. We all know this. From their far left, and feel compelled to disagree with the president on almost anything, and certainly this. So that's where we are, but we don't need to be here for long. In order to get us out of this mess, a negotiated solution will need to check these boxes. It's really simple, Mr. President, really simple. It will need the support of 60 senators, which will obviously include a number of Democrats. It will need to pass the House, and it will need a presidential signature. That's how we make a law in this situation. 60 votes in the Senate, majority in the House, and President Trump's signature. That's what's needed. That's what will end this regrettable episode. Reopen the lapsed portions of the federal government and produce the investment in border security that our nation really needs. So I'm glad that productive discussions are continuing at this hour between my friend, the Democratic leader in the House, and the White House. When those negotiations produce a solution that is acceptable to all of those parties, it will receive a vote here on the Senate floor.
All right. Let me tell you about Abby Johnson. Abby Johnson, another great person whose life just totally changed. She was working for Planned Parenthood for years. She was a supporter of abortion. She had abortions. She rose through the ranks of Planned Parenthood, started running the place, and then she had to actually go into a room with an abortion. And her whole world changed.
She'd be a great conversation on a podcast as well, actually, at some point. They're putting together a film called UnplannedFilm.com. UnplannedFilm.com. You can read the story. You can check out the videos. You can lend your support, which would be really important. When we want to get these messages out, we need to support them when they come up. UnplannedFilm.com. UnplannedFilm.com is the place to go.
The fusion of entertainment and enlightenment. This is the Glenn Beck Program.
This has not been a good couple of weeks for Donald Trump. And well-timed if you're a fan of the president, because nobody's really paying attention to the news right now. But if you are, just look at what's happened in the last 2 weeks alone. Kavanaugh has gone to the side of the Democrats in the Supreme Court when it comes to abortion. The Russian agreement that everybody was in denial of for so long, and the president said never existed, that came out yesterday. He folded on the border, and not only are they not going to pay for the wall in Mexico, there is no wall, and we gave them $5 billion. Okay, then North Korea came out yesterday. North Korea said that we're not going to denuclearize at all unless you remove your troops. Syria, we're abandoning the Kurds again. Yesterday, the president just announced on Twitter, no one at the Pentagon even knew. We're going to pull our troops out of Syria. It's time for them to come home. Wait, what? The poor Kurds? The Christians? ISIS is not dead. They've just been pinned back. What does that mean? It's not been a good week. We'll give you some of the details and what it all means in 1 minute.
This is the Glenn Beck Program.
I didn't even get to the bump stock thing yesterday.
Oh, that's my cause du jour right now.
My gosh. All right. First, let me tell you about FilterBuy. FilterBuy is our sponsor, and then back to the program in less than a minute now. It's FilterBuy. FilterBuy makes filters for your air conditioning and HVAC system, your heating, and they're all made here in America. There was a factory that was about to be closed down, and it was a family-owned operation. A guy who married into the family was working on Wall Street. And the family was really upset because it was a grandfather's business and it just was going to go out of business. And he said, you know what? We got to find something that we can make. We're not going to, it's a small town. We're not going to put all these people out of work. And so they found that American-made air filters could be made cheaper and better, and they could get them to you in a different way than through, Home Depot or Lowe's. That's how FilterBuy was born. Now they make great filters, one of the leading filter makers now in America. And the thing I love about them is I don't have to think about it. I order it and I say auto renew, and whenever I'm supposed to change the filter, they show up at the front door. I put it in. It makes my life really super simple because, quite honestly, this is more than I even want to think about filters for the rest of my life.
All right. We do it one time, and until we get the Jetsons robots and they actually will do the filter replacement for you, that's the next step. But until then, this is the best we have.
So it's filterbuy.com. FilterBuy.com. Save 5% if you're on auto renew. It is filterbuy.com. It's not going to be a good day for Donald Trump fans. Yesterday, the president, by decree, outlawed bump stocks. Okay, first of all, let's not set a precedent of taking away anything to do with guns through presidential decree. We would be apoplectic if anyone else, even if George Bush would have done it, let alone Barack Obama, we would be apoplectic. Now, I am not defending bump stocks. I don't know anybody who uses them or why you would want them. You can do the same thing with a rubber band or your belt loop. I mean, it doesn't matter. People are going to find a way around it. But you don't ban it. And for this president to come out and just, at a time when people are not talking about this, I mean, we just gave away something that I don't care that you could have given away as a compromise later in Congress.
Right. You're telling me you couldn't get a bump stock ban through Congress with Democrats?
Of course you could.
Of course you could have.
Of course you could.
Why would we force this through? And again, I think it's completely unconstitutional.
I do too.
First of all, we should set the baseline there. It's unconstitutional to do this. This is obviously an infringement on your ability to bear arms. Obviously. It is. Fundamentally, it is unconstitutional. It's tied to another law that is unconstitutional, which is these 3 different statutes that come out against machine guns and automatic weapons, which I completely think are unconstitutional as well. So, but even if you go beyond that, let's just say we live in this world, we're in a progressive world where we don't necessarily follow the Constitution all that closely, and we do the things that just have to be done, and that's the world we live in. Even if you're in that world, you gotta pass a law. You gotta pass a law. You can't have the president just making up distinctions on, well, we don't like that thing. Again, in the legal statute of what a machine gun is the very clear language that a bump stock is not included. Very specifically, it says any weapon which shoots, is designed to shoot, or can be readily restored to shoot automatically more than one shot without manual reloading by a single function of the trigger.
So in other words, you pull the trigger back
once
and you hold it.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what a bump stock is.
It isn't.